We live in a time where you just can't hide. You just can't hide. A bad car just gets uncovered, and that's all there is to it. And James May, who's the guy on the right there, he said this thing: every time the future of the car looks to be under threat, the car actually improves. There couldn't be anything, it's as true as it gets. That's absolutely right. The car is a fascinating device that just keeps getting better and better and better. And there are actually people been in Google's car this summer that drove itself. It was the scariest thing. I drove in the driver's seat. This thing is driving itself using Google Maps and radar, and it actually sends people frightening stuff. I hope a Dodge never has to do that so as we go forward. The other thing I look at, the analogy, I love Formula One. How many people watch Formula One in here? So, a few car guys. It's not as popular here, but I love Formula One. And this was the best season because there were 5 guys that had a chance right to the bitter end. It was one of the best seasons I can remember. And in a way, to me, that's a symbol of the automotive industry right now. And obviously, we're the underdog. We're looking at the successful car companies like Ford is doing really well. A lot of people are kicking butt in the industry. And for sometimes we felt like Minardi. Remember the old Minardi team? Like one day, And we've been there before, but it's been fleeting. So how do we get to the point where we're consistently champions? And the other thing I read recently in Wall Street Journal was the idea of the Big Seven. That's so true. I mean, we always talk about the Big Three, but let's face it, it's the Big Seven. It's here to stay. There's 7 companies that have over 5, maybe even 8% market share in the industry, and it's not going to let up. So all of us have resized and are going to compete, and it's actually fun. I think the consumer at the end wins. And here are the Big Seven's offerings at the Detroit Auto Show, and the irony here is you have the Koreans with a beautiful E-segment vehicle, and General Motors with the Sonic, one of the smallest vehicles. So it's like, how does that work? So there's some interesting dynamics going on where people are really filling out their portfolios in ways that we wouldn't have called 5 years ago. And it's a beautiful thing. I think we're learning a lot, the industry's maturing. And I just recently, I don't know how I squeezed it in, but I went to the CES show for the first time. I love that show. Ford had an amazing presence at that show. Alan Mulally was there and he spoke. But what struck me about that show is if you want to shop for a flat screen TV, that's the place to go. But it also reminded me how quickly things can become commodities. There are innovations one minute and commodities the next. And it was just dizzying, the amount of choices the consumer has. And that's really what the auto industry is becoming. No one really makes a bad car anymore. So how do you differentiate yourself going forward? Do you offer a service? Do you have a special trick? And every time I stop by the booth, they all tell me why their product was better, and I was like, wow. And it reminds me of how difficult it is to market in this day and age. So that's something I keep in the back of my mind constantly. And then finally, the idea of flagships. What is a flagship? The flagship can hurt you. Like R300, it was a great car when we launched it. We didn't take care of it. We let it erode. It became uncompetitive. It never had a refresh. And it wasn't even configured right to start with. And it never really flew as tall as it could. And it actually hurts you. And nowadays, a flagship doesn't have to be a luxury car. A flagship can be a Chevy Volt, right? It may not have great volume or make great profit, but it says a lot about what you're trying to be. So the flagship idea is really a foregone thing. So speaking of flagships, we launched this car. This was a very interesting project for us to work on. A lot of people thought it was dead, and it did get delayed. It should have actually launched before the Charger. We went back and rethought it, and Sergio and I debated this design quite a bit. We cut off the front end and started over. But I remember him driving the vehicle from Detroit to Toronto to see his mom, and he didn't understand the car, and we joke about it today, but driving the car, he got it, right? And there's something special about a nice large sedan that's comfortable to drive. But he wanted me to evolve the design, so it had to represent what Chrysler can be. So I don't know how many we'll sell, it really doesn't matter. It's the point of what can this company be? There's this Chrysler of all names, Can it be this luxurious? Can it be this beautiful? Can it be this relevant? So when we did this car, we benchmarked the very best. We said, forget everything we know. And that's the magic of progress. Don't listen to your critics sometimes and say, okay, I want to be this. So we benchmark cars costing twice as much as ourselves. The natural instinct is to benchmark laterally and try to cut costs, as the first one was done, actually. And this is the opposite. So this car is just pressurized with content and some of the best tricks we know. There's literally sound deadening material, acoustic sound deadening underneath the car, and the wheel arches, laminated glass everywhere. I mean, every trick in the book is on this car. And when I finally drove the first prototype, I literally was emotional because I can't even believe it's our car. I was just in disbelief that we could make a car that was this good. So hopefully that it resonates in the marketplace. And then this is a cover I didn't expect either. Motor Trend had 3 of our cars, 8 of our products on the cover. And of course they have to dig us, right? So you see on the bottom right, it says, can they make it stick this time? So that's the big question. What's going to be different about Chrysler this time around? And we asked that along. But as you know, the automotive industry is difficult to call, difficult to understand. I mean, these cars were designed 2 years ago, some of them a year ago, most of them 3 years ago. The change started a while ago. We saw the train wreck, so to speak, coming, and the strong decided to kind of do something about it. We kind of had a band of, a Navy SEAL dynamic going on, and the people that really love the company locked arms together and said, we're not going to let these cars be an embarrassment anymore. So the 300, the Charger, the Durango, the Grand Cherokee, even the Ram at the time, were vehicles some of the best people in the company decided to protect, and thank God they did. In the meantime, our Italian buddies came along and said the rest of your portfolio is suffering, so let's shore all this up. So, and we did. I mean, this is just half of these are some samples of the new interiors we put together. Some of these were done in less than a year's time. We basically said, we have to be relevant in every segment. So this is half of it. We actually have 16 new interiors this year, unprecedented. I mean, a lot of my staff basically hasn't slept in 2 years. It wasn't easy. And these guys, I'm gonna have to deal with them. I know it's gonna take a while. These are the analysts. I love this picture because that's what my vision of an analyst is. But I'm not worried about him, I'm worried about them. Because at the end of the day, you sell a car day to day at the dealership, and I'm worried about that elusive family that really is oblivious to us. And we make, in Detroit, we kind of drink the Kool-Aid and we read the magazines and newspaper, but you go a few miles, a few hours outside of Detroit, and no one really cares. I hate to say it. I really, I have friends living on the West Coast and they're like, what's going on? They're more worried about the weather or whatever, the fact that it's snowing in LA or something like that. The point is, we have to be relevant in the moment, right? So that's what we're worried about. Our dealers say it. They're already coming back. Our dealers are profitable. People are shopping again. They say, just give us a product. Stop worrying about everyone saying, just make a great car, and that's what we're focused on. And most of that really doesn't come from, algorithms and business cases. It comes from culture first. So until your culture's right, you can just forget about anything else. You got to fix the culture, and that's one thing. If anything I've learned in my 18 years at Chrysler, it's the people. And Mark Fields and I were just now talking about that. It's a dynamic. Some of the people that left to jump ship, they all miss it. It's not about the money sometimes. I mean, I'd have been long gone if it was about that. I just love the culture. There's something really special about it. And you also, as a leader, can't underestimate, and this is something Sergio's taught me, the power of one. One person can poison the company. One person can make it the most beautiful thing ever. And I think as we get a little older and more mature, and we become leaders in our own right, we tend to forget that a little bit, right? We kind of forget to stop and shake hands with that person, have that little conversation, and warm up that individual that's working their butt off for you. And that can make the difference. That person will work 3 times harder for you if you just care, So this is a sketch. I haven't sketched in a while, but I actually drew this little sketch because I couldn't find a picture on Google. Trying to describe the dynamic I saw a few years ago when I was a junior leader and watching my then private equity types and all the different people that have done the merry-go-round at Chrysler. The air was just too thin up there. They get to such a point they can't see anymore. And the cloud's supposed to represent that sensation of not being able to see what's going on at the lower levels. So we have flattened out. Matter of fact, that if you've been to the tech center, you see that 15th floor building? There's no one in the 15th floor anymore. Sergio refuses to put his office there. It's nothing more than a meeting room now for the media. He has his office on the 4th floor with all the other engineers. And that's symbolic. That meant so much to everybody when he did that. So the 15th floor is almost a museum now. This was Nardelli's office, this was Lesor's office, this was Bob Eaton's office. All the 7 CEOs that have been through. Sorry, I'm still in therapy, so I apologize if I'm getting a little emotional. So part of what I was trying to communicate this is another thing I think about a lot is in my business. I'm an unusual guy, obviously, because I come from a design background. I really have no business being a CEO, but I'm learning, right, every day. And when we start a project in design, we start totally differently. We start with a creative mindset. We look for inspiration. It's a really touchy-feely process. And sometimes in boardrooms, you've got the opinion of one guy who flies in a couple times and he makes a comment and doesn't realize how much he affects the entire company without really drilling down and getting it or having the experts speak up. So that's what I say. Boardrooms are not for alignment, are for alignment, not for taste making. You have to let the tastemakers make the taste. These are people that have a natural affinity for innovation and for sensing trends or making trends. So you've got to pick those people out in your company and let them have a voice.